In this episode of the podcast, we're talking to photographer Zach Sutton. So Zach specializes in beauty photography, but I've been a friend and followed Zach's work for quite some time, and I gotta say his work is impeccable across every genre that he's covered, from editorial portraits to standard portraits to headshots to fashion, makeup, beauty. He's done quite a few different genres of photography and done them well. In addition to that, he's actually rebuilt his business and rebranded himself multiple times from the ground up when he moved to New Mexico, as well as when he made the second move to Los Angeles. So I wanted to talk to Zach about all these different experiences. I wanted him to come to the studio, tell us not only how he built up his businesses, but how he eventually landed in beauty and kind of found that niche to focus in on. Let's go ahead and jump in on the episode. This is the TSS Podcast. It's a place for authentic conversations to uncover the stupid, simple truths that help us succeed in business, create better relationships, and lead more fulfilling lives. Welcome to Think Stupid Simple. Zach, we begin the meeting of the minds.
All right.
With candles.
I like it.
You know, setting the mood.
White tea. Nice.
Yeah, this is from a little candle maker that I used to be neighbors with.
Oh, nice.
It was kind of cool. It was their business that they built, Design House. They built this little business. I think it was from one of them getting let go from the jobs, and they just started making candles in their garage.
Yeah.
And it's like legit now. Like,
I have like 3 or 4 friends, like through the pandemic, has just like started candle businesses.
Specifically candle businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was, like at early pandemic, everybody learned how to make bread. And then like eventually you transition into candle making.
From bread to candle. Some people
Exactly.
stay with bread. Some people stick with the bread.
They cut themselves short.
There was something like when they told me kind of what they did, I not kidding. I went back home and I talked to Yen and I was like, how would you feel about making candles?
Yeah.
Like at home. I was like, I could see this being a cool home business for us.
Yeah.
I love candles.
Right.
And that's the quintessential reason to get into any business, right? You like photography, so you might as well be a professional photographer.
Sure. Right.
No, that is not how it works.
That is exactly how it works. Let's sell some cameras.
Well, I do genuinely love business, and I was like, I think I would really enjoy making, the process of like designing out candles and like making a product and then actually taking it to market. I love that aspect.
Yeah.
And I thought candles would be such a cool thing to do. Anyway, we talked about it a bit. We actually asked our neighbors to educate us.
Yeah.
We were like, hey, I will trade, because they wanted photography lessons. And I was like, I will trade you photography lessons for candle lessons.
Right.
And they were all excited at first. And then I think they thought about it and they were like,
yeah,
we don't want to train competitors. Why would we do that?
Right. Yeah.
And then later they
like
realized
they've got some secret candle technique.
I think it was, they were silent for a while.
1 wick. We have 4.
And then I think they went onto YouTube and they looked up like, who is Pi? And they shortly after that, they reach out and they're like, we're ready for those lessons now.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're good, guys. We don't want to do candles.
Too late. We've already found a new candle maker.
No, but they are awesome. Design House, in case anyone listening wants cool, candles.
Yeah.
But we're not here for that. We're here for you, brother.
Aha. Thank you.
So you live not that far.
I live in West Hollywood. So anybody that's familiar with LA, you're down here in Orange County.
For us LA folk, that's another country. You might as well
I would much rather board a plane to go see somebody. I was just sitting on the highway just being like, is this my life forever? But I made it.
Pretty much the question that millions of people in California ask themselves every day.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you for making it down. What's funny is like I have so many friends that are in Los Angeles and San Diego, and they literally might as well be in like another state because I don't ever see them. And I even forget that they live nearby. So when you reached out, I was like, you live nearby, don't you?
Yeah. I have friends that live 15 miles from me that I see twice a year. Just because like I'm never in their neighborhood, they're never in mine. So
it's such a weird thing, dude. I go back to Utah and like as soon as I land and get a car, I'm like, dude, I'll drive 100 miles anywhere.
Right.
Like send me anywhere. I'll go see a friend in Provo, which is like 50 miles away.
Yeah.
But it's 50 miles of like moving. So even though it takes the same amount of time to get to LA, it's still different.
Yeah. There's like a special type of like self-loathing when you're in traffic in Southern California.
It's stressful traffic too.
It's just kind of misery.
Yeah.
But you sort of learn to cope with it. So
We all need Teslas. Do you have a Tesla yet?
I don't. I'm working on it. I'm buying a motorcycle soon. That's like my midlife crisis is a motorcycle. And then I'll get a Tesla.
Do you know Mike Kelly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He lives up there too. I mean, I'm going to say
he was exactly the friend I was referencing when I said
is he? Okay.
he lives 10 miles from me and I see him twice a year.
That's about how often I see Mike too.
Yeah.
Usually when we're in Puerto Rico together.
Right. Exactly. Right. When you're thousands of miles away from your guys' home.
That's how it is. Honestly, a lot of people in the LA area, they see each other at WPPI, especially like wedding portrait photographers.
Right.
They literally don't see each other all year, and then everybody drives to Vegas.
Right.
And you hang out with your California friends in Vegas.
Exactly. I quit going to like PPE for a bit, and because it was just overwhelming. It was just a hassle to get out there, have to like stop business. I was just too busy for it essentially, and was also sort of stubborn on the trade show and just being like, I've been going to these trade shows for years. It's not innovating. It's not developing. It's me seeing my friends all the time. I would rather work. I would rather develop my business. And I have found through this pandemic, like I miss trade shows. Like
I know
the next one that's open and it's safe, I am going so hard. I'm going to have like a drink in my hand permanently. It's going to be a mess. I can't wait.
It could be the Palm Springs shit show. And
Exactly.
everyone's going. Like everyone's like, I am ready to.
Mm-hmm. We're going hard.
And if you are you single?
I am.
Okay. Being single, I have realized that during the pandemic, there's been two different experiences occurring simultaneously.
Yeah.
One is the married folk who are like, holy shit, I now have to spend all day, every day with you and these little tiny monsters. That's its own like experience. And then you have the single experience, which I didn't even know was a thing until like my friends started telling me about what it's like dating with COVID and like all this stuff.
Well, so I just frankly haven't. I was in a relationship at the start of the pandemic. The relationship ended. And then ever since then, I'm just like solitude, like just appreciate solitude.
Was it the pandemic that made you like, that gave you the time to kind of question?
No, but it certainly didn't help. I don't think the pandemic has done any relationships any favors whatsoever. But yeah, it had kind of like ran its course. And then, ever since I'm just like, I'm not jumping back out in that pool yet. I'm waiting to see what happens.
It's kind of a weird time too, because I feel like if you're going to jump out in that pool, you're jumping out with a limited number of people who are also making the decision consciously to jump back in the pool.
Right. Exactly.
And you're like, who am I going to, you're going to meet some pretty risky people, I think.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Well, and that's like the thing is, and even at the start of the pandemic, I quit shooting entirely for like a few months.
Okay.
Mostly because like I would watch Instagram stories of like models and people that I worked with, and there were just some that had complete disregard for the pandemic. And I was just like, there's no way I'm going to like hang out in my studio with them for 4 hours as they talk about how they were in Miami last week and they're jet setting across the world. And I'm over here like, what? Like,
we had a lot of those. It seemed to have not even, like if you work with models, which we work with models quite a bit, it didn't even faze them.
Yeah.
They were like, wait, what pandemic? I was literally at a bar last night.
Right. Exactly.
No
exactly.
clue.
And I mean, I took it extremely serious, and certainly still do, but I was just like, I needed the break anyway, from work. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to take this moment to sort of reset, recharge, and still slowly getting back into it. But it's weird because, for me, I work in studio. So, we're in close proximity to these people all the time. And so they have to be careful too,
For sure. I'm very curious now where we're at. It's a weird question, but do you feel like you're any more or less kind of worried about the pandemic? Do you feel like we maybe overreacted? Like what do you, like this was pretty freaking severe, dude. I mean, we're just opening up now in LA.
Yeah.
Now.
I mean, I think our reaction was probably appropriate. In best case scenario is that we would look back at it and be like, oh, we overreacted, because if everybody follows the protocols and the protocols work, it's going to make it look minor to what it could be, And that's sort of the problem that I think we've always ran into is, cities and everything would shut down entirely and numbers would go down, and then they could be like, oh, we can open back up. And it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, if you're jumping out of a plane and you pull your parachute, you don't cut away your parachute because you're like, oh, I'm not falling anymore. You know, you kind of have to stay under the canopy for a little bit and, you know, see where it goes. And I think that there were times when we overreacted, but I think we're at the end of, you know, the light's at the end of the tunnel. And, you know, certainly right now it's like, now's not the time to go to Palm Springs and drink with 30 people.
I feel like weird things happen too. Like, to use your parachute analogy, it felt like we all jumped out of the plane and the central guy was like, hey, we should pull our parachutes. And then 48 other states were like, fuck you, we're going down. Right. And they were just like,
don't tell me what to do. Yeah. Exactly.
We ain't pulling nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's weird. You know,
should we bleep that, Anthony? I feel like we need to bleep that.
Nah. Let's just roll with it.
Let's just go with it.
We'll call this one like After Dark.
This is the explicit episode.
Exactly. Right. You set out 2 of them, one with like a parental advisory in the corner. Yeah. Well, and I'm from Michigan originally. And I've lived out here for several years, but like Michigan has had it really bad.
Yeah.
And you know, during the pandemic, I was traveling back to see family and friends and stuff occasionally because I had downtime and was traveling responsibly and everything. But just seeing the stark difference of like living in LA. Thank you so much. Sir. Living in LA and then like going back to like small town Michigan and like masks don't exist.
Yeah.
The pandemic doesn't exist. Meanwhile, like their numbers were spiking, ours were like going down, and we're like, can't we see some correlation here, guys? Like, it's not that hard.
It has nothing to do with a mask. I mean, you could drive an hour outside of LA and I would still see the same thing. Like, you get to some of the side towns and like nobody cares.
Yeah.
It was just a weird way that what was being said made so much sense scientifically, and then to watch everybody kind of just dismiss it.
Yeah, we'll dismiss it. I mean, I think
not everybody.
Right. I think the challenge is, you know, there was so much, and there still is so much mystery behind it, that, you know, it was easy for people to dismiss it if they chose to, because they're like, what do you mean? Like, this virus just shows up and it's going to wipe out the whole world population. And it was just like, well, maybe, like, maybe, like, can we not try to find out?
Well, and the thought of like that a mask couldn't help, because remember that whole thing way back where it was like, you know, and if you just think like rationally, like the best analogy that I ever heard was like someone that went onto Twitter. It's like some dude that just goes onto Twitter and he's like, let me ask you a question. Would you rather I fart in your face bare-assed, or would you rather I be wearing my underwear when I did it?
Exactly.
And you're like,
yeah.
Please put on your underwear first.
Right, please. Yeah. Do I have to choose?
There seems like there's no right answer in this question.
Exactly.
Anyway, running and owning a photography studio throughout this thing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that's like. So what I mean, we've been having fun kind of getting into this, but I've wanted to talk about several things. One, Anthony, can you actually pull up Zach's work? Because his work is impeccable.
Oh, thank you.
One is you kind of carving out this career in beauty. Last time I remember looking at your work, I felt like you were doing a lot more editorial kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, I'm surprised you're not keeping up on my work more, but no,
I don't keep up.
A few years ago, I, you know, kind of went through that phase where I was just like, I hate all of my work. I want to rebuild all of my portfolios from the ground up. And my website was incredibly diverse.
Yes.
You know, I had headshots, I had, you know, editorial stuff, I had some commercial stuff. I kind of had a broad range of stuff. So I wanted to kind of like narrow in my path a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I started with beauty just because that portfolio needed the most work, and kind of through that found a lot of love for it and never really left it. So
that's so interesting. I mean, your work is fantastic, dude.
Well,
as everyone can see.
Thank
but
you.
Your editorial work was amazing too. I remember you doing headshots and editorial and kind of everything.
Yeah.
I never got a chance to kind of talk to you about this path that you took through photography. I know we met like 5-6 years ago at WPI, I think.
Somewhere around there.
So tell me about this journey. Like, first, what was the initial steps just into trying to go pro as a photographer?
Yeah. So, you know, I had been shooting I've been shooting for 15 plus years at this point. And, you know, I'm from Michigan originally and was just sort of shooting on the side in Michigan, and just kind of like something that I really enjoyed. Was trying to carve a career out of it, but like really wasn't. And at some point I've always described it as like my early midlife crisis. And I was just like, I got to get out of here. So
this was like 20 something.
Exactly.
Your first midlife crisis.
I'm like a rock star. I'm going to go out early or something. And so I moved to New Mexico of all places. And I moved there very spontaneously, very randomly. But when I moved there, I didn't have any contacts in New Mexico. I was just like, I want to get out of Michigan. I want to go to the West. And so
Why New Mexico of all places?
It was honestly like I rented a U-Haul and drove through New Mexico and just thought I thought the sky was bigger there than I've ever seen before. And I realized that doesn't make any like rational sense. The sky's the same size, but it was just sort of fascinating. And I had a really weird sort of experience when I was there where, it's very desolate and empty in New Mexico. Yeah. And I had rented a U-Haul and I was driving a U-Haul and like just drove off of the highway at some point, took an exit and then turned down this like road, and that road just kind of like slowly turned into a dirt road, and it was like some native ground, and eventually just got out of the car and just kind of like walked around and was like, I am within probably 10 miles of another human being. I was like in complete isolation.
That's a wild feeling.
And like was like, I'm 20 something years old at the time, and I was just like, I've never felt this before. And I was like, I think I need to just like experiment with this a little bit more. So I just found an apartment complex and was just like, I'll take a 6-month lease and live there for 3 years.
I'm going to make a wild guess here, but month by month, an apartment in New Mexico, $300, $400?
Yeah. I think it was like $450 or something.
That's good stuff right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are the days.
Living the dream right there.
Exactly.
In a desert wasteland. Yeah. But I genuinely, I think I vaguely recall you maybe telling me this story when we were perhaps a little bit buzzed at WPPI.
Sure.
But you are the only person I've ever met in my entire life who was like, I went on a road trip and landed in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to stay.
There was a lot of charm to my story because, Albuquerque, New Mexico is generally not a destination spot. No. So like, I didn't know anybody in the entire state. And I would just would go to a bar or like a brewery and just like sit at the bar. And if somebody came sat down next to me, like I'm going to chat their ear off because I just needed social interaction. And I was able to develop like such an incredible social circle so quickly because people were just kind of fascinated. Like, you moved here? Like, why'd you move here? And I'm like, I don't know.
Are born here and they decide to leave.
Exactly. I mean, like, New Mexico's, kind of state tagline is land of enchantment, but people there usually call it the land of entrapment because you're never really able to leave New Mexico. But yeah, I lived in New Mexico for 3 years, had an incredible time. I love New Mexico even to this day, but it just sort of reached a point where I was like, I need to move to California. I was coming out here enough, getting enough work out here that I was just like, I need to try. So
yeah. I only had one experience in New Mexico, and it was when I worked for Ernst & Young. This was way back, my previous lifetime.
Yeah.
I was an auditor, a financial auditor.
Yeah. And
I was asked to go to Albuquerque to audit a concrete company's financial statements.
Okay.
And it was like, I had dreams of what this might be like.
Yeah.
Or, nobody wants to have that dream. But like, if you did have that dream, it was exactly like you would picture it. Like I landed, I saw a lot of brown, lots of dirt.
Yep.
Went on a big, long drive.
Yep.
Got to a place that was like on the side of a dirt hill.
Yep.
Construction machines. There was a little shack that I walked into.
Yeah.
Got like all the financial statement binders and just went to town on them.
Yeah.
When afterwards, I was like, what's there good to eat in town? And they're like, well, if you drive 30 miles that way, there's a pretty decent steakhouse.
Yeah.
And decent meant that, your steaks would be like $6.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
I actually got it medium rare, but in hindsight, I was like, that was probably not the wisest call.
Right.
At a $6 steakhouse.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was really good.
Well, and the food, if you know where to go, the food in New Mexico is incredible. I mean, it's like iconic levels of food.
That's wild. I hear that. But like what towns, what areas?
So, I mean, I think it's something like, half of the population of the state lives in Albuquerque. Okay. So there's a lot of like very, very small towns kind of throughout New Mexico because New Mexico is, I think, the 5th or 6th largest state in the U.S.
Yeah.
So it's pretty barren.
Yeah. Yeah, land-wise, it's huge.
Yeah. And like Albuquerque has a ton of incredible food. They have New Mexican food, which is sort of known for its red or green chili, which is grown in New Mexico. But it's sort of like a blend of like Native American food mixed with, Mexican food, and kind of has its own special take. But it's like, once you get a taste for it, it's incredible. I go to New Mexico. I try to go once a year, and I just like gain 10 pounds in just food.
So you go to New Mexico and you're already a photographer at this time, and you're trying to build your business in New Mexico.
Yeah. I had moved there with like a little bit of money saved up and was just like, I'm going to make this happen, and kind of learned through that, and certainly have experienced it since then, is like my biggest motivator is just like fear of failure, like struggle.
Yeah.
Like I get so much done when like, the stakes are on me, So I moved there and I was just like, I'm not going to accept no for an answer. I'm going to make this business happen. And just like got on the phone, started calling every single business I could find, and, just kind of developed my work through that, and shot a lot of headshots and did some weddings and stuff like that to get by. But yeah, sort of use that opportunity as like my way of being like, all right, I'm making photography be my thing. So
I can't imagine a place that is actually, I would put New Mexico and New York up there as far as like difficult places to start a photography career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was
in different ways.
Yeah, it was certainly had its challenges, because, smaller markets, it's easier to stand out in smaller markets, certainly. But like, there's also that like communal sort of like, when somebody's getting married, they usually have a cousin or somebody that's a wedding photographer. So it's really hard to break into those scenes, especially when you don't have a social circle developed yet.
And there's also, it feels like there's limited budgets in terms of like creative / artistry.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's not necessarily something that somebody, when you grow up in like a bigger city, an LA, a New York, Boston, Chicago, like all these different areas, I generally feel like people are not only making more money, there's a lot more competition to deal with, but then there's a lot more appreciation of the craft.
Yeah.
Whereas like Utah's another one of those places where a lot of incredible, talented artists, they just scrape a living by. Part of it is because like the conservative movement, which is kind of part of the religion, the local culture is so strong that like you're not supposed to spend money on anything.
Right.
Like, you're supposed to save like legit. Like you're encouraged to like not even like, don't go into debt to buy a house. There's no other way to buy a house.
Right. Yeah. How do I do that?
Like, so it's difficult like to get people to actually spend money on that. So what did you find success with when you were in New Mexico, of all the different ways that you were kind of going out and looking for business?
Well, so headshots was like a huge play back then. New Mexico, they had some film credits going on. So there was a lot of productions that were being pushed to New Mexico. Breaking Bad, obviously being the most famous. But there was a lot of movies and stuff being produced. So kind of through that, there was a lot of actors that sort of sprung up and just started shooting a lot of actor headshots.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that I got in touch with a couple, like there was 3 agencies, like acting agencies in New Mexico, and maybe 4, but got in touch with a couple of them. They really liked my work and they just started referring business to me. So
that's rad.
Yeah, I got real lucky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your work definitely had to be a big part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Cause up until that point, there wasn't a lot of people, the acting scene was being developed there, but there wasn't very many photographers that had came up and was like, I'm the actor headshot person. So I was able to kind of like get into the market pretty quickly and sort of get the attention of some of the agencies and creative directors and different people like that, and build my business around that for a long time.
Where did you learn photography? Did you study in school, or was it?
No, just kind of trial and error more than anything. I had bought a camera in probably like 2007, maybe. Like, and before then I was like kind of playing around with photography a little bit here and there, but I had bought a camera. It was just like, this is something that I'm going to do. And then just like took a lot of really bad photos for a long time. And it wasn't until, YouTube and just finding different photographers that I really liked and just kind of figuring it out. So
crazy, dude. And you've been writing for F-Stoppers actually for quite a while too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't written for them. I wrote an article for them a couple weeks ago, and it was the first article I've written for them in, I think, 5 years.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like a one-off of like, here we go. But yeah, when I moved to New Mexico, I started writing for F-Stoppers a bit, was one of their editors for a really long time. And I still dabble in the education side of things, and still write for various publications. I've written for SLR Lounge a couple times, but mostly I'm focused on shooting. So
I mean, that should be the thing.
Yeah,
because there's no way that there's very few activities that can. I guess if all you did was write, then eventually you could make that replace like a shooting income.
Right.
But for established photographers, I always wonder like, why are you teaching workshops when you could just shoot another client gig? You know what I mean? Like, there's this weird, there's these weird movements that kind of go around, and maybe every industry has this, but our industry, I feel like they're particularly noticeable just because of how prevalent social media is for photographers.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
You have to be on social media. So you could be killing it doing weddings or doing headshots or doing beauty work.
Yeah.
And you see a friend, do well, they book out a workshop.
Yeah.
And with no kind of business mind to like, okay, just because they sold 10 seats and that's $10,000.
Yeah. how
profitable actually is it after the end of the day once
Right.
you've done locations and permitting and you've paid for everybody's food and
Yep.
every single thing, models, styling, all that kind of stuff. I'll watch photographers go and put on these workshops and they'll spend $8,000 just to make $10,000.
Yeah.
And then their friends will be like, I need to go and do that. And
Right.
I'm like, dude, that's a lot of work for not that much. And you already got this book of business going on.
Yeah.
You do a wedding that makes 2-3 times as much as this.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this FOMO effect where they like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I never got that.
Well, and I've taught a number of workshops. I don't teach them as often anymore, just because of it's so much time, it's so much effort. It's and it's really just like the promoting of the workshops and different things like that's sort of my nightmare.
Yeah.
But both you and I work with Pro Photo a lot, and when I teach a workshop, usually they're one of the sponsors, and
Yeah.
I've always told them, like, if I'm doing workshops, I want to do like 5 in like a month and a half,
Yeah.
and just like almost like go on tour and
Yeah.
just be like, all right, I'm doing it Chicago, New York, LA, Houston or something like that. But I don't like doing workshops throughout the year all the time, because I'm like, I can get myself in that frame of mind and do them and like make a little money at it, but it's not as profitable as people think it is.
I mean, you have to treat it like its own business. Like
Exactly.
you can make it profitable too. Like I know 2 incredible photographers, 2-man.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
wedding
yeah.
photographers.
Yeah,
We had them on the podcast recently, and they do very well with workshops and
100%.
education.
Yeah.
But that's primarily what they do. Like same thing with me. Like most people don't realize that I don't run our photography studio.
Yeah.
My business partner and his entire team run the photography studio.
Right.
I'll shoot with Lynn and Jirsa 10 times, 15 times a year.
Yeah.
But all of my efforts are on the educational side. And I don't think people realize that these are 2 completely different business models.
100%. Yeah.
So it's an odd thing. I always try to kind of like correct some of the FOMO that goes on. But
Yeah. I mean, workshops are fundamentally a lot of work. There was a time when I was pushing workshops really, really hard, and it's something that I think I'm pretty good at as like an educator. But I sort of reached a point where I was like, I want to be a photographer. I don't want to like train photographers so much. You know? So
in your portfolio, does it show some of your editorial work? I know that's not your focus now, but
if you go into portfolios, you might be able to find portrait portfolio. Maybe we'll have some. There's still some old stuff buried in there. Yeah.
dude, I loved your. Is that Seth at the top left?
Seth.
Is his
No.
name Seth?
No, that's John.
John. Okay, never mind. I thought I might have worked with him. So, I mean, this work is incredible too.
Thank you.
When you came over to, what made you make the move to Los Angeles?
I'd been out here a few times. I guess I sort of just felt, we had talked a little bit earlier on like, I've always found my biggest strides have sort of came through like struggle or discomfort. And I felt really comfortable in New Mexico.
Okay.
And sort of had like this fear where I'm like, 10 years could pass by. I could have this successful business here, but like sort of stay at the ceiling of what this city can offer me. So, I came to LA a few times, booked out a couple jobs, and was just like, I want to do bigger, more things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Would it surprise you? So I just did a interview with Peter Glatz.
okay.
He had been running a dental practice successfully for 43 years. At the age of, I think, 67, he sold it all, sold his home, sold everything.
Yeah.
He put all of his money into banks and investments and then locked them up. So he basically like just said, I'm never touching them.
Yeah.
And then said, now I'm going to make a living as a chef.
Nice.
And
Good
he
for
became
him.
a line cook.
Yeah.
For very prestigious restaurants, like Michelin-starred restaurants in the country. And then he worked his way up into, different roles. But it was very fascinating that he tapped into something. He recreated that drive and motivation by basically taking everything away. Because, if you knew you had a couple $1 million in the bank, you would work at a very different pace than, like you said, when you land in New Mexico and you're like, I got to make this work.
Right. Exactly. No. And, I have to like, cause it's nice feeling comfort, it's nice feeling comfortable, recognizing like all my bills are paid for. I can go on a vacation. I can do these things, but I have to like challenge myself fairly regularly to be like, you got to shake out of this. You got to be a little uncomfortable, because I've always seen the most growth, not only in my work, but as a human when I'm uncomfortable. So
how old were you when you made the move to LA?
So I think I was 29.
29.
And I've been here for 5.5 years.
Okay. So you're not even 35 yet.
I'm 35.
You are 35.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Young guy, man.
Oh, well.
I got 5 years on you, bro.
Well, 35 doesn't feel young.
So how long did you feel like it took before you sort of had a grasp on the LA market?
I mean, I think I'm still figuring it out. It's always evolving. I think, for me, so my business strategy, especially when, after I moved into beauty, and maybe I'm divulging my secrets, but like a few years ago, I kind of took a look at I had booked a few beauty jobs and different things like that. And all of my work was found on Instagram. All of my work was found on social media. Nobody was looking at websites anymore. So I just kind of like took a very like close look at, how Instagram, how Facebook, how social media works. And it's all chronological. So if you quit posting on Instagram, nobody's going to see your work.
Yeah.
So my business strategy was just like, I'm going to outproduce. It's like, I know I'm not the best beauty photographer in the world, but I can like outshoot. Like I can just put more work out there than anybody. I have a personal studio. And then it was at that time where I like hired a retoucher to kind of offload some of the work, and just was like, I'm going to shoot 10 times more photos than anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of how I broke into the beauty industry, was just like producing more than anybody.
That's hilarious. Can you actually pull up Zach's IG as well?
Yeah.
I mean, that offloading the retouching thing, I don't think people realize how significant that is, because, when it comes to, if you're not in photography, particularly in the beauty arena, you could snap one of these shots in a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
But each one of the photographs that you take is 2-3 hours of editing. Yeah. So from a business standpoint, what does a retoucher typically charge for something like this?
So I have a deal with my retoucher. So she's essentially on a salary at this point. But the prices are pretty broad, and it really depends on what you want to do. So when I first started outsourcing a retoucher, I was still doing all of the color grading. It was very important that like the work looked like my work. So I was just like, all I want you to do is to do skin. And even when I, hired the retoucher that I work with now full time, like she would retouch an image and send it to me, and I would like retouch the same image and send it to her. And then we would sort of compare and be like, I really like what you did here. I really like what I did here. So she could have a better understanding of my style. Because, it's scary, especially when you're self-employed and you're like the sole person in your business.
Yeah.
it's scary to like give some of your identity to your business to
Definitely.
someone else, you know, and instead of sort of delegate instead of just taking over.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult for me initially, but you guys don't follow me. What's that about?
I will.
All right.
100%. So what would you expect what would you expect someone to kind of think of in terms of price range for beauty retouching?
For beauty retouching, you're looking at anywhere from, you know, $15 an image to $50 an image.
Okay.
You know, it's every retoucher I've ever met, like they won't give a quote until they see the photos.
Sure.
Because certainly some photos need more work than others.
Yeah.
But usually that's around the price range.
Okay. I don't think people realize that, you know, when people think of like investing in their own business,
Yeah.
they're usually thinking about like spending money for assets. They're spending
Right.
money for maybe advertising,
Right.
but they don't often think about spending money to buy back their time.
Exactly.
And this is one of the ways that a commercial photographer of any sort can essentially leverage and buy back your own time at a very affordable rate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge promoter of like outsourcing your retouching because, you know, for me, for a long time, I loved retouching and
Yeah.
it was sort of like therapeutic
Kind
for
of
me.
soothing.
And then it just sort of changed over time. And, you know, after I had done it for years, it was just killing me.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I have to find someone else to do this. I want to focus on these parts of the business and I will outsource the rest.
So what were the early years in LA like as you're trying to like basically one of the things that I talk about is, you know, when you're breaking into something, you definitely need to have a sense of hustle and your willingness to accept certain jobs versus where you might be now, like 5 years into this now.
Yeah.
What were the jobs like then versus now?
Well, so, I mean, I had the advantage of when I moved to LA, I was already fairly well known in the photography scene. So I was able to kind of call on some contacts, some people that I knew to just sort of like throw jobs my way here and there. But yeah, when I moved here, I wasn't in the beauty industry at all. So it was I was still shooting some actor headshots, but that's such a grind here in LA.
Yeah.
And it was just getting kind of weird off, like not even sure where I was getting them, but I was just getting little jobs here and there that were just like, oh, you're shooting this portrait of a director or something like that. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And like, oh, we need you to shoot this. And, you know, just kind of a lot of weird portrait work, but it was just sort of like sporadic and random and not very like focused. And then it was after doing beauty, you know, my philosophy is always like, it takes like 6 months of like grinding to like really see the results
For sure.
know? So it was like I started shooting beauty, not getting a lot of action, not getting a lot of activity off of it or any like job inquiries or whatever. But it's just like you got to keep pressing on for so long. And you know, slowly started getting like smaller brands reaching out, different clients reaching out through that, and you know, it's just building every moment. So
what might have been a typical budget when you started 5 years ago in LA versus what is a typical budget for you today?
I mean, when I started, you know, it is that like struggle. So you could have probably talked me down to like pennies.
A couple $100.
Right, exactly. Because my philosophy has always been like, it's easier to let your client talk you down from a price than it is to try to like upsell them after you've given them an initial quote.
Yeah.
So I would give them like a fairly high quote and then be like, okay, that's out of our budget. And I'm like, what's your budget? And then, you know, I would quote them $1,800 and they're like, well, our budget's $600. And I was like, I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Don't tell anyone. So yeah, I mean, the budgets have gone up considerably.
Yeah.
It's still one of those things where, you know, in commercial photography, usage is important, but then even just like the client is important because, you know, if it's a small lash brand that is like working out of a garage, hustling, you know, $1,500 for them is a lot of money to spend on photography. And I want to work with those people because those people are me, you know, but if it's, you know, like CoverGirl, there's no way I'm giving them anything for $1,500 because I'm like, you're, you know, a globally recognized brand.
Yeah.
Like you have to have appropriate budgets. So it's hard to quote things out by just like a baseless email. You know, anytime a client reaches out to me, I have like 10 questions that I ask them before I give them any sort of estimate whatsoever, just to get a better idea of like who they are, what they need, and then build the quote off of that.
That's so interesting in the sense of like, yeah, I guess there would be a lot of makeup and startup kind of brand companies out here.
Yeah.
And those would be probably the most fun jobs, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, there's always the struggle of like the most financially rewarding jobs are usually the like least creatively.
enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've worked with like big brands where, it's like 5-figure day rates and different things like that. And you're just sort of like miserable for 10 hours.
Yeah. You're
but
kind
then
of a
you're
cog
like,
in the wheel, but
right. But then you're like, oh, I'm
rewarded for it.
like, yeah, I'm making money here. And then I've worked with like super small brands where I'm, working for far less than my day rate normally would be. And you have like a blast because, everybody's just like trying to create something cool. So
now I would imagine in New Mexico, you probably didn't experience the set dynamics in terms of kind of all the different, I want to say, the politics that are involved on like an LA set.
Yeah.
So how did you get used to that?
By just kind of probably breaking rules. Like, everybody in LA, like everybody, I think fundamentally is probably a little self-involved.
Yeah, you could say that.
And, when I moved here, I was very much just like chatting it up with everyone and like was sort of not staying in my lane. And I think it was probably being a little irritating to everyone.
I did that too, and I was told.
Oh, really? I never was told, but I could always kind of sense it.
Yeah.
I think I can read the room a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think probably over the years, I've probably quieted down a bit and just kind of found my own activity to do in between shooting. But yeah, the dynamics are way different.
It's super different.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember the very first commercial, like big commercial set that I was on was an American Express commercial.
Yeah.
And my buddy was actually he was the ad agency creative director. He owned the ad agency. So he was like basically top person of this entire thing. And he's like, you should come out and get a sense for this, see if it's something you enjoy, because with your skill set, you could be one of my DPs and this would be a done deal.
Yeah.
So he's like, why don't you come out and just roll behind the scenes? So I came out and was just filming behind the scenes, to make a little thing.
Yeah.
So no, he didn't tell people like he's going to have this friend come out. So
Right.
I'm my normal self, just like, hey, tell me about how you got into this. And hey, tell me about this.
Yeah.
And I see the director, he's sitting down at the, for lunch, and I'm like, I'll go sit at your bench.
Right.
So I go and like take a seat.
Yeah. I've dealt with people like you on set, like now, where it's like, oh, it's the creative director's friend just taking behind the scenes photos.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh God.
So as soon as I sit down, his assistant was like, this table is for directors and producers only. And I was like, oh, okay. And I like left the table and I was like,
I'm producing something.
this is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the moment where I could tell that most of them didn't want to talk to me.
Right.
But I was actually told. I was actually specifically told. And I felt it was weird.
Yeah.
It's weird to be like, I don't know. This wasn't a moment like I wasn't interrupting a meeting or anything.
Right.
This was just like hierarchy being enforced for the sake of hierarchy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I still hate that. I still try to like talk to different people when I'm on set and just kind of get a sense of who people are.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important,
I feel the same way. Like I think any person on the set has just a bigger right. If they're doing a job, they should be there.
100%.
And but it felt very much like, and I obviously knew like, don't talk to the talent, talent, which I did anyway.
Yeah.
But because like, what are you going to do? Like, you're just going to like sit there and film someone like,
right.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, and you get so much by just communicating, you can get so much more better work out of talent. I'm making small talk with like the models on a set all day, all the time, just because I'm about to photograph them. I want them to get a sense of who I am, and I want to get a sense of who they are.
Yeah.
So
you must have enjoyed the overall experience, though, especially now you've had your chance to, you're directing your own sets and you're doing all that.
Yeah.
What do you love about that process?
I mean, I think fundamentally I'm a planner.
Uh-huh.
I love pre-production.
Interesting.
Like,
I hate it with a passion.
That's like my game. I like building concepts, coming up with ideas, and sort of like building them out. Like I have Amazon packages at my house right now of just like weird stuff that I've bought.
Just like
that
props,
I'm just like
weird.
Like I bought I don't want somebody to beat me to the punch on this, but I bought like a Lazy Susan, one of those like spinning discs. And I'm like, I'm going to mount a light to that and make it like a weird ring light to make just weird stuff with like shadow shifting and different things like that. And I love...
Put that on our mood board. We're stealing that.
No!
I'm just kidding. This won't hit air for at least a month. So you got a month to get this idea out there.
All right. I'll do my best. But yeah, so like I love kind of like creating the idea that sort of comes to fruition. So that's really what motivates me is like, and just sort of the sense of completion when you do shoot what you want and you know that you got what you sort of envisioned.
Interesting. Because I find that, you to be good at something, and I don't mean like you can make a living at something and not be necessarily good, right? Like you can make a living and just be like decent enough to kind of like eke by.
Right.
But to truly be, maybe we should use the word great. To be great at something, I find that you have to really enjoy the process. If you don't, you can't really get to that place. Yeah. And I can see that now. It makes sense because you enjoy the pre-production, the planning, I would imagine the orchestration of the entire thing and pulling this thing off. Yeah. Whereas I hated those aspects of it. And so when I got the chance to, I directed a couple commercials, it was 2 for Nissan and a couple for Toyota. And we were kind of starting to get into this automotive thing. Yeah. And after doing the jobs, I was like, I hate this. I'm miserable. I'm miserable in the meetings. I'm miserable having to charge time just to be in meetings. Yeah. Like, I don't want to have to like, you got to pay my day rate if you want me in like a pre-production meeting. Right. Like it just felt weird, like asking for it. And then it's to free money. I know that's the way that you need to look at it. But for me, I don't know what it was. And then when I would be on set, I remember on one of the Nissan shoots, I had something like 6 creative directors, dude. There was 4 from the agency, and 5 creative directors, 4 from the agency, 1 from Nissan directly. Yeah. And I was like, so every idea that I have has to go through these 5 people before I can actually do something.
Yeah. That's always a challenge. I hate that aspect of like set life. Yeah. Is that like, you have multiple people that you have to impress and they all have very conflicting, I was just on set I was shooting a skincare line and there was 2 creative directors and they had vastly different ideas of what they wanted. And they weren't communicating, but they were communicating to me. So it's like, one of them's like I want weird, man. Yeah, they're like, I want weird angles and I want weird crops and stuff. And like kept having me like lay on the floor and take like weird crops of like skin. And then like the other woman would come by like 15 minutes later and she's like, what are you guys doing? Yeah. And I'm just like, this isn't my fault. It's his. Like, and you just kind of have to like tread that line to try to entertain them both while also being like, you guys need to formulate your idea a little bit better.
Yeah, it was wild. And especially considering like we went into this Nissan one planning to do 6 commercials and they were all supposed to be these like kind of lifestyle commercials, which was the arena that I wanted to focus on, like more authentic, more real type stuff. And we landed on the first one being this Asian blogger. Yeah. She's kind of I hate using the word influencer, but that's what she is. Asian fashion influencer. And so she's our talent. And we're supposed to kind of build this authentic day in the life of as we sell the Nissan Altima. Yeah. Not a sexy car, mind you. Like of all cars that you could be selling, I think I was selling the Toyota Prius and the Nissan Altima. Oh, wow. I was like, this is a long way from like, Mercedes Benz and whatever you want to be doing. Yeah. But anyway, they sold me on this I sold them on this lifestyle idea and they loved it. And then they sold me on like, yes, we're going to go with your vision. And then the very first shoot, like we plan out everything and everything is scratched off. Oh yeah. And rewritten. And then, it's no longer a day in the life of. Now we're bringing this fashion blogger on set and we're reenacting a photo shoot on set. Yeah. And we're like, we're going to shoot this high fashion blog. And I'm like, this girl's never been on a set. Like, what's authentic about this?
Yeah, the set of a set.
Yeah. And then she just happens to have our Nissan Altima parked on the set. So in between shots, I like to go and check out my kid who's in the back seat of the car. I'm like, what the hell is happening right now?
We're being authentic by being the most unauthentic we can.
Yeah, that is exactly what we landed with, was this commercial that was so far from authentic that I had ulcers. So like going into like the third one, this is an ad agency, like we wanted to keep a good relationship with them. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I backed out of it.
Yeah.
And then they reconvinced me to go on the next one saying I'll have more control. And I backed out of it again.
Yeah.
They reconvinced me again.
Yeah.
And I finally just ended up calling the CEO of the company. And it's not a huge company, but it's a decent sized one. And I was like, we call him Uncle. I was like, Uncle, I can't do this. My doctor said I can't do this. Like straight up lied.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not good for my health. But it legit was like giving me ulcers, like thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, stress, the stress that can come with like set days, especially when, it's always like the creative team aren't properly prepared. They don't know what they want. They've got conflicting ideas. Like that is a walk through a landmine in its own right. You have to have like an immense amount of patience for that kind of stuff. And I still struggle with that at times where like you're on set and it's just like, it's sort of a nightmare, but you've got to kind of like smile and be like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. And to imagine, like, if you're the director, you're in a pretty good position. But if you're anybody else on that set, you've got so many potential people you could piss off that will prevent you from getting a job again.
Right.
Like, if you're the director, you just worry about the creative directors.
Right.
And you're like, I got to make them happy and make the client happy and whatnot. But if you're the DP, you're like, I got to keep everybody happy, man. You need your gaff people to refer you. You need like every single possible person to like refer you to future jobs.
Right.
So anyway, it's interesting because weddings don't do that for me.
Yeah.
Weddings don't stress me out. But I know for many photographers, they would slit their wrist before they shoot a wedding.
Well, I think it's, because weddings, and by all accounts, not all of it, because, you have your couple shoot and you have to pose people and all of those things. But there is a lot of like photojournalism that goes into weddings. When they're doing the ceremony, you're just documenting it. I don't know how to do that. I look at like street photographers and I'm like, how do you just like capture the moment? Like, just I don't get it.
Make a photo.
Cause I'm like, I'm a planner. Like I plan things. Like I have like ideas. I have like concept boards. I have like things drawn out. I know exactly what I'm going in to do. So the idea of like just carrying a camera around and being like, got it. I'm like, what'd you get? How'd you do that? I don't understand that. So yeah, weddings, I'm very much on that side where I'm like, weddings, no thank you.
That's hilarious. Have you seen wedding photographers do commercial work and editorial work?
Yeah.
Because it's freaking funny, dude.
Yeah.
We get in there and we're like, all right, give me 10 minutes. I'll get this. What the hell do we do with this other 4 hours now?
Right. Well, I used to shoot weddings a little bit when I was in New Mexico, and I had one of my best friends. She was a wedding photographer at the time, and so we would like assist each other.
Yeah.
And like that's when I like very plainly knew that I wasn't designed to be a wedding photographer, because she would always have these moments where like she would like almost be tearing up, and she's like, "This is so beautiful, the couple's so deeply in love," and this that, and I'm always just like, 3 more hours till we're out of here. Like, and I never had like that moment where I'm like choked up, just being like, this is perfect. I'm just like, we're almost done.
I get that moment all the time. The moment of like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe this is my job.
Yeah. I never had that. I'm always just like, we're almost done. Like dinner's served in an hour. We get a break and then we can get out of here. Exactly. Yeah. I've never had that with a wedding. I'm always just trying to leave.
That's hilarious, dude. Well, I truly believe that you have to like line up. It's funny because even in photography, there are so many different potential pathways of like finding the right fit. And each of these different, you have product photography. Have you done much product photography?
Yeah.
How did you enjoy that?
Not very much.
Yeah. I hated it.
I started shooting product. I got real lucky because I started doing it a couple years ago just because I had enough inquiries for beauty brands and they're like, we also want you to do product. And I was like, well, I don't do that. So I was like, I need to develop a portfolio, and
almost makes sense in beauty though. Cause you kind of need to pair it.
Yeah. And I got hired to be on set for a few product jobs, and it was just sort of miserable because it was the same thing of like creative directors having conflicting ideas, staging work, set design, like
and
for
this
product
time,
stuff.
You're literally talking over just still life objects.
Exactly. And there is so much like nuance to that kind of stuff. Like it is incredibly difficult to do, or for me, it has always been. But like if I'm shooting it in my studio at my own pace, it's great. So, I had built a small product photography portfolio, and and was like slowly kind of like tossing it out there to a couple brands. And then like when the pandemic happened, I was lucky enough to get a couple product, like brands, like beauty brands that are just like, well, since there's COVID, like, can we just ship you the product, give you a style board, and then give you a deadline? And I'm like, yes,
please.
So then I'm just like 11 o'clock at night in my studio, drinking a beer, just like slowly staging, working at my own pace, nobody breathing down my neck. And I'm just like, yeah, I just got to get this done by next week. So,
hey, if you can do your work and watch Netflix, you got a good job.
That's a good job.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's a great job.
Yeah. So yeah, I was lucky enough to like put together a product portfolio book at just the right time to be able to like get by in the pandemic and get some work done, but not have to deal with like the reality of product work.
Yeah. So that's the next thing I want to ask is pandemic. Before we get there though, I do want to ask, in speaking of like, picking a path that aligns with kind of your values and who you are, what was it about specifically beauty work that really drew you into it?
Well, so, for me, it was, like I said, I wanted to rebuild my portfolios. And I looked at like my beauty portfolio needed the most work by far, because I was just sort of limping in with that. And I started rebuilding that book. And, really it was like an opportunity to me. Like, I love light. I love shaping light. And so it was a really, really great opportunity to like kind of light people creatively and like, with like perfection in some ways. And then I also like was like, I want something that can really show off my like retouching skills. And so it just sort of started with that. But I really love how like creative you can be with beauty photography.
Yeah.
When I was doing headshots, it was sort of the same thing. It was just kind of a routine that you would do. And at least with beauty, you can kind of like have weird plays with color, have weird plays with like energy and different things like that. And it's like, there are photos in my portfolio that like I could never do unless it was beauty photography. I have like photos of, well, even if you scroll down just a little bit, there's like all of this like fractaling photos there. Like you can't do that unless it's like beauty. You can't just be like, oh, you need senior portraits. Well,
that actually looks really cool with beauty work.
Yeah.
But I've never seen
it works.
fractal stuff look good in other.
Right. And if you keep scrolling down, like there are like photos of, just like really, really like crazy light work, in terms of like hard cuts.
But pause here, Anthony. I do find that most beauty work falls in this palette kind of right here. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, clean beauty, they say like the clean beauty kind of pays the bills.
Yeah.
It's everybody needs like a clean, really sort of like just perfection look. But you can also just kind of get weird with it.
I love, you had a black model below. She looked amazing. That one looks crazy too. All that color.
Yeah.
Is she wearing black ink or red ink? What's
no. So I did a how I got the shot on the Lens Rentals blog about that one, but it was using a lot of gels. She was painted. It was a whole production.
That's so rad.
Yeah, it was fun.
So our listeners can check out the Lens Rental blog for that one.
Yeah.
She looks incredible.
Yeah.
Getting skin tone to come out that uniform as well is really, really difficult from an editing standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I work with incredibly talented makeup artists, the models, especially if they're a model that, excels at beauty work, they take care of their skin. So yeah, it's easier than, I don't want to take all the credit by any means.
Keep scrolling, Anthony. Yeah, I can see quite a few different styles, but I can also see that they all kind of distinctly fall within your work. You know what I mean? Like it's very definable.
Well, and I love to do like kind of like some creative lighting stuff. Of course, there's no examples on here now, but I swear there's some in here.
Oh, that's cool. It's another fractal one.
Yeah. But yeah, I like the, I like the controlled environment of the studio, and then being able to be like, I have full control over the light, over how, this works, and just kind of like play with it. Like even like this kind of stuff where you do like super hard cuts.
Yeah.
It works for beauty and it wouldn't really work elsewhere. So
I love it. Okay. So you fall into this arena of beauty. Now, what's interesting to me too, is that this is 10 years into your craft before you kind of start specializing purely on beauty.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, prior to that, I was shooting a little bit of everything. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I had this conversation with Patrick and Lee recently of the F-Stopper guys. And
yeah.
they were kind of talking about like, what is the typical, entryway into photography? And we all kind of landed. It was funny because Mike Kelly at first was like, it's specializing. You got to specialize.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's usually down the road. And Lee and Patrick were like, yeah, that's down the road. Like most people will dabble and try different things and pay the bills with whatever they got to.
Right.
Until 5, even 10 years down the road when they choose to specialize.
Right. Well, and I still have like corporate clients that I work with that need like headshots for a billboard. I work like a law firm that I shoot with all the time. And like they show off my work, but then like the stuff that I'm shooting for them is boring. It's on a white backdrop, just like a lawyer standing there smiling.
Yeah.
But then they like look at my portfolio and they're like, wow, you do really cool, interesting stuff. I'm just like, yeah. But like we all got to get paid,
Well, we do the same thing. I mean, I have a lot of clients, like one of our wedding clients who's a doctor brought me out just to do his editorial portraits. He got this big feature. So I'm out shooting editorial portraits, but that's not what I typically do.
Right.
But it is fun to have that break and to go and do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially with the clients you already have. It kind of gives you something else to kind of do. But once again, if that's going to be the thing that you do, you kind of have to specialize. There's so many incredible, like Clay Cook, editorial photography. Like, how do you compete with anybody who has these focuses without actually going and spending all of your time doing that thing?
Yeah. I mean, my philosophy's always been like advertise the work you want to do.
Yeah.
So it's like I still do corporate headshots. I still do kind of weird off jobs here and there. I used to do some like on assignment work for the LA Times, where it would just be like, we need you to go to a school and take a photo of a principal or something. And it would just be boring stuff that it would never hit my portfolio. It would never hit my social media, but it was like, they would pay me.
Yeah.
And then like the work that I actually wanted to do and like the work that I would promote to try to attract clients was always just kind of beauty work, because
that has to be understood. Like artists have to understand that, there's paying the bills and then there's creating the work that you want to. And with enough time and experience, you can push more of what you're doing and more of your time into creating the work that you want to.
Right.
But there always has to be this understanding of like,
absolutely. Yeah.
I kind of feel like a lot of people pick up whatever medium they go for, like painting or, the camera, whatever it is. And they kind of just expect that like all the things that I'm going to be doing are going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is the quickest expectation to give up, because otherwise you're going to be done. You're going to be done
bad
so
news
quickly.
for you.
Yeah. So this is super interesting though, because when I see your work, I see very, very commercial fashion work.
Yeah.
Then I have other friends. I'm sure you know Lindsay Adler.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Her fashion work is very much more, I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of like her own creative take on fashion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that more of a market from, I'm so curious, is that more of a market from like a fine art standpoint, or is that more of a working with direct commercial client market?
Yeah, I think it, with it being her personal take, I mean, I think it is hers. Like I've always had a commercial background.
Yeah.
Like I've always, when I got into photography, I wanted to be like, and maybe it was just my own like laziness, but I was just like, I want to be the photographer that has like 6 jobs a year that all pay a fortune, and I can live rich and not have to be like grinding it out all the time.
For sure.
So I've always done commercial work. But she understands fashion. I wear black,
Yeah. Like I mean, the stuff that she does, she conceptualizes it, but it's conceptual fashion. That's the way that I would
No,
place
absolutely.
it.
Well, and she's built her brand off of that, and she's, the best at it. She's incredible.
It's wild to think that within fashion, there's conceptual fashion versus commercial fashion versus.
Right. Well, and, I say that I'm like commercial beauty.
Yeah.
And, I've had brands reach out and they're like, we want like no retouching. We want natural light. And I'm just like, I'm not your dude.
Yeah.
Like I'm not the guy.
Yeah.
And, I know I'm confident where I'm at and what I do, and that's what I promote. So.
That's its own thing too, which is like more lifestyle fashion.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
And it's, I guess what I'm getting at is that people think, photography is a specialty. And I always like dial in and say, no, like photography is a genre.
Right.
Fashion isn't even a specialty. that is a genre. Like within fashion, you can niche down to like this.
Absolutely.
And same thing with like weddings. Like, yes, you can start by shooting weddings, but then we primarily shoot South Asian weddings. Like that's 50% of our audience is Indian brides and grooms.
Right.
So within these different arenas, within photography, you have a subgenre, and then within that you have sub niches that you can essentially focus on. And when you become the best in those areas, then it feels like clients just kind of start coming to you at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think people need to have a better understanding. I mean, I've had so many friends, that have kids, and they're like, "Oh, maybe you can take photos." And I'm like, "So here's the thing. I don't do newborn photography. I won't produce anything good. Like, just find somebody.
You might
that
as well
does
grab an iPhone."
Exactly. I'm like, just find somebody that does that. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. So,
yeah, that's its own monster on its own. Okay, so pandemic comes.
Yeah.
What the hell are you doing now?
Oh, nothing. Playing video games.
Which games, by the way?
I play a little Call of Duty.
Okay.
So the pandemic came. It was really difficult for me because, up until that point, my business strategy was to outproduce, and I was just exhausted. I'd been like producing more photos than any other beauty photographer I know for a year plus at that point. And I was finally starting to like reap the rewards. I was getting big clients reaching out and was getting the jobs. And then like the pandemic just shut everything down.
Yeah.
So like at first I had like a sense of like relief because I was just exhausted. And I was just like, okay,
get a break.
Financially, I'm fine. I'm sound. Like take this opportunity to just kind of like relax a little. But then I felt like I was going stir crazy.
Yeah.
Cause I think initially when like everything closed down, we're like, all right, we stay at home for a month. This will be over and we'll get back to our lives.
There was a nicety to it too, where you knew that everybody was taking a collective break.
Right.
So nobody's like,
exactly.
There's very few people going out and like,
exactly.
You didn't feel like you were missing out.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think, initially everybody is like, all right, we take 6 weeks off and then we're out of this and then we're back to it. Nobody expected it to be a year later and us being like, what?
And we're still dealing with it.
Yeah. We're still,
in April.
Exactly. So at first it was a huge relief, and then like it was really tough. I find most of my own happiness when I'm busy, and when I'm doing something that I really love. And so to be put in a position where like, not only are you not doing those things, but you can't because, there's restrictions, there's different things like that. And then, I work with full teams, I work with hair, makeup, everybody. And so if you're still wanting to produce something, and I'm still facing this now where like, I've been vaccinated. A lot of the people I work with have been vaccinated, but like everybody's still kind of standoffish. So it's still really hard to assemble a team, even if it is just like a test shoot or, something that, we're just trying to produce content. It's still very hard to find people that are willing to do that just out of the safety and concern for themselves and others. So it was really, really tough after like the first couple months. I kind of had that like sense of relief. And then I just kind of felt myself kind of like going a little crazy where I was just like, I have to produce, I have to create something, and just felt, I've always felt that creativity has like, it kind of builds on itself. So when I lost sort of like that creative mindset, I just felt myself like not feeling like myself at all.
It atrophies, right?
Exactly.
Like any muscle, like I feel like that creative muscle atrophies really quick.
Yeah. And so I didn't shoot for a few months. And then when I started getting back into shooting, a little bit, I was like, do I hate this? Because like I just couldn't come up with cool concepts. I just didn't have my flow. And I think it was just mostly because I hadn't been doing it. And I had just taken so much time off that I wasn't back into that routine. And I'm still trying to like find my pacing a little bit. I'm much better now, but
was there anything outside of, I kind of feel like the pandemic forced all of us to figure out new ways of meditating and kind of coming back and centering like ourselves.
Yeah.
For me, I had writing before the pandemic. So I've been working on a book for quite a while, and I write personally. And so writing was one of those things that was like, okay, this is not different. I just keep doing what I'm doing. But one of my huge pieces of mental support came from jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And that's quite possibly the best way of getting COVID. Like if there's any way of getting COVID, this is the most effective way of transmitting it. So the first things to shut down, jiu-jitsu gyms, and they stayed closed for almost a year.
Yeah.
And that was a massive blow to my mental health.
Right.
Because now you not only took away my exercise, this was also social support. It was, interacting. You're kind of like, in a weird way, you're in contact with other human beings, and there's kind of a level of touch to it, even though you're trying to kill each other. But there's still it's like human connection.
Yeah, yeah.
And so to take all of that away, in addition to the meditative aspects of jiu-jitsu, that was really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was, routine. My routine was always, I'd wake up, shower, get around, and then like the first thing I do is grab my laptop and go to a coffee shop. And I'd grab coffee and I would like work in the coffee shop. I'd sit down, have headphones in.
This is pre-COVID.
Right. Have my headphones in, and like the first hour of my day would be answering emails, kind of organizing everything.
Yeah.
A lot of like concept board developing and stuff like that would happen at a coffee shop. So then when everything shut down, like my office, where I would do most of the things, suddenly became takeout only. And I had to like kind of restructure how I worked, after years of doing that. Like this has always been my routine. I always do this. And that was really difficult. And then, just like the isolation when you're in a career path that is so, so many different people around, you're photographing people, you're connecting with people all the time. And then to just go from that to isolating was really, really tough.
Yeah, I find that most photographers, they became photographers usually because of a want to be around people.
Right. Absolutely.
Unless you're doing landscapes or something.
Yeah.
But otherwise you want to be around people. So to have it taken away, it's very interesting too, the weird things that you don't necessarily recognize. Like this building that we own, what we bought before the pandemic, has been empty for almost the past year. Other than like our crew up here.
Yeah.
We normally have 30 employees downstairs, team members, employees that come in and out on a daily basis. Nobody.
Yeah.
And at first you're like, oh, cool, I get to work from home.
Right.
And then you start working from home and you're like,
I haven't left the house in 4 days.
Yeah. And you don't realize that, hey, I actually relied on the social interactions between my colleagues as a part of my, social support system.
Right.
You don't realize that until you're, 10 weeks deep at home.
Right. And it's, back to what we said earlier too, like, with us being in creative fields, creativity breeds off of itself.
Yeah.
So like being around other creative people is a huge motivator for me to think creatively.
Yeah.
So it's like when I'm on set and I'm working with makeup artists and working with hairstylists and working with just like fundamentally creative people.
Yeah.
I feel I feel more creative then.
Yeah.
So when you kind of shut all of that off, you're just sort of like rotting away.
Were there any projects that you took on during the pandemic that kind of helped keep your creativity and kind of those muscles engaged?
No. I'm a little disappointed on how I handled the pandemic because I'm usually the type of person that's able to pivot, something bad and like just sort of take advantage of a bad situation and make it better. And I think it was just kind of a combined of just like exhausted with work.
Yeah.
Right before the pandemic, I was working on a political campaign that ended, and just like, so sort of dealing with all of these challenges where like I never had any extra time from what I was doing to suddenly having all the time in the world. And it just kind of like freaked me out for a really long time.
For sure. I mean, it has to be said that surviving the pandemic financially and just making it through this is an accomplishment of its own.
Yeah. Well, and by all means, like, I don't think, and I don't beat myself up for like not doing much during a global catastrophe.
For sure.
Because, surviving can be a challenge in its own right. But, I have so many friends that like learned video editing, learned 3D modeling and stuff. And they're like, what'd you learn? I'm like, I read a couple books. Like, didn't do much though. Yeah.
I got my 3rd prestige in Call of Duty.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I got pretty okay at that. So yeah, I mean, I'm still shaking out of it, and I've been really good lately. I've been what some people have been describing as I've been building the pro photo museum, because any old pro photo gear, I'm buying it.
That's
if it's
hilarious.
a good price, I'm buying it. So I've bought so many different lighting kits in like the last couple months, and just trying to build something bigger. I want to move into a bigger studio space. I want to provide a place for friends to be able to rent and use.
Yeah. So I don't often talk gear, but I do want to talk a little bit of gear with you.
Okay.
I mean, the reason why that I don't often talk gear is I don't know if you feel this way too, but gear to me used to be really exciting.
Yeah.
Until every single camera could do every single thing that you wanted it to do.
Yep.
Is that the same for you?
100%. Well, and I think, I had like a really, really great moment, I guess for my own self, like a year ago. And I had found like a B&H wish list that I had built. And it was probably like in 2008, 2007 or something. I had just gotten started. It was like, someday these are all the things, like, just like the ultimate wish list. And like to look at that and be like, not only do I have all of those things, but they're like mostly gathering dust in my studio. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, like I've achieved, this goal that I set up for myself that I didn't even know I wanted. By the time I got there, I was like, none of this is that important.
Yeah. It's kind of wild. And I do think early on in a person's career, regardless of the field that you choose, you tend to overvalue the things that are not the measures of success.
Right.
Like for photographers, it's gear, right? They look at the gear and like, oh man,
if I
when I can get that lens, I'll be able to do this. And it's equivalent to like I've got a chef buddy who he's a professional chef, and it's funny because I don't see other people making this mistake like we do. He wouldn't ever go, if once I get that induction stove right there, then I'll be able to cook the meals that I want.
I think it exists in music. I used to play music, and
you're right.
Yeah,
it totally
be like,
does.
if I could just get that pedal board, if I could just get that new guitar, that new amp, I'll be able to,
I can replicate that sound.
Exactly.
I can't get that sound without this.
And and then by the time you get that stuff, you're like, I don't need any of this. Like this is a pain in the ass. So.
Especially if you ever get to that level, usually what happens is people acquire the amps and everything, and they're like, man, I still sound like shit.
Right, exactly. Like, what I really need is lessons.
So this sucks.
Right.
But in the photography side, I also lost a little bit of it when like Sony, I love what they've done to the industry.
Yeah.
But frankly, the cameras that are coming out today are so far beyond what most anybody could ever do with them that there's nothing exciting anymore. Like, it's like, okay, more resolution,
right?
A little bit more dynamic range, a little bit better ISO performance, but it's already just insane.
Yeah.
It's kind of like 10 years ago, I kind of felt like when you got into the photography industry, if you were to relate this to cars, you could see the Civics and the Honda Accords and the Ferraris and the Porsches and the Toyotas. You could see all the different models.
Right.
And it's kind of like in the last 10 years, basically everybody got upgraded to Ferraris. And then you could spend the extra money to get like a Veyron if you want.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at it now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a fair assessment. The gear, I think you come to realize that your camera isn't your limiting factor
at all.
It's going to be your own creativity. It's going to be your own skill sets. It's going to be those kind of things. It's rarely ever your gear.
Yeah.
So
that said, though, there are things now. Tell me this: what about pro photo lighting do you love and appreciate?
I mean, for me, especially like I said, I've been building the Pro Photo Museum. So for me, it's like reliability.
Yeah. That's for me too.
I started like most photographers do with like alien bees. And, I would always joke, like, even at my workshops, I would joke like, oh, they've got the best customer service in the world, because you'll probably talk to their customer service at some point. And they're a great company, and not trying to bash them or anything, but I kind of got tired of having to send in my lights
or carry spares.
Exactly. And just like, that reliability issue was always kind of a concern. And, for me now, like I bought a pro head, like a used pro head yesterday, 2 days ago, yesterday. And I got it for super, super cheap. And I just happened to like look at the serial number, and this light is older than me.
That's wild.
And it will last forever. I have like pro packs that I've gotten serviced, and like the service center here, they've like looked it up and they're like, oh yeah, this is fired over 1 million times.
That's insane.
And they're like, it's probably got another million left in it with like moderate, work that might need to be done with it. So like for me, it's one of those, like, I kind of reached to a level where I was just like, I don't want to have to worry about a light going out. I don't want to have to worry about, my lens not being sharp or anything like that. Like,
yeah,
reliability becomes such a huge factor when you get to like a certain level where you're just like, I can't afford to be without this for X amount of time when it's getting repaired. So
I also feel like, at the beginning of your career, you're kind of, you're managing mostly the creative aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're kind of on the very technical side, managing a lot of those different pieces. And you're like, okay, if I can save money and just be a little more technical and that kind of stuff, by all means.
Yeah.
But as you start gaining success, your roles shift into less technical. It's more so, like what you have described of planning and interacting with clients and all the other pieces of a set. Your sets get more complicated. You take on all these additional responsibilities. And so we look to areas where like, where can I reduce stress and mental energy?
Yeah.
And one of those is I just need to have the gear that I want and that's going to work.
Right.
And I can't relate to people what that means when I walk into a shoot, and I used to do this all the time where like I would go to a wedding with 4 flashes expecting like I'm going to have some sort of an issue. Remember we had pocket wizards and like all this kind of stuff. And I'd have spares of spares. I'd have everything. And then,
I still do that. Unfortunately, I think it's ingrained in me where I'm like, I've always got a backup camera. I've always got spares and I never use them, but
but there's this sense of anxiety when I'm setting up lights, especially back then when I'm setting up those lights and there's people waiting and you're putting them up and you get to do that test shot and you're like, oh, please just fire.
Please work,
like, I just need you to fire.
Work.
And it fires and you're like, oh,
yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and like, frankly, reliability isn't sexy. It isn't a sexy stat for like gear generally. People want super shallow depth of field. They want, all of these crazy new technologies in it, but reliability is like by far the most important.
It's generally not even a consideration though.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like when people compare this kind of stuff, that usually doesn't come across their mind until they're put in the position where, they realize.
Right.
And then they're like, oh.
Yeah.
And you can't convince them otherwise.
Right.
Unless
there's also like no measure of metric
Yeah.
in terms of reliability.
Yeah.
I've always been a component of like gear review tests. We got to do drop tests.
Yeah. That's the worst. I mean, like just the idea of like dropping it.
Right.
But yeah, it happens. So.
Yeah. Right. I just like the idea of like contacting a brand that's sending you something for a review and you're like, oh yeah, I've got to do a drop test though. Like, wait, what? No, you don't.
Please don't add that to our review.
Right.
I do enjoy the lights from that side. I do genuinely wish though that the one thing that I think all of us have asked ProPhoto is just like, please, what do you think it's going to be?
The spot small.
Which one?
The spot small. Only
Spot
because
small.
That's the projector lens thing that I use in my lighting. I've become like the advocate for that because I wrote a review on it and then like a week later they discontinued it. So I get like 3 emails a week of people like, how do I get one of those? I'm like, I don't know.
I'm going to say that that's important, but maybe down the list a little bit. I'm talking about our specific remote function.
Oh, battery life?
That too. I just want them to show power. Like
show
power instead of relative power.
Yeah.
Because that is like the one change. Like, please, just...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, let's keep in mind that I'm using Dinosaur of Lights.
Yeah, you're using the...
So like, I'm like, oh, to switch the power, you're like clink, 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 like turning some big dial on the top of a Pro Pack. But yeah, no, that's an immensely important, that is, so much has changed in my career in terms of lighting. Because I remember like going out and carrying like a 20-pound battery.
Yeah.
And like, just having like all of this stuff that like weighed a ton to like get out and be able to shoot on location. Like shooting on location, like I was able to stand out early in my career because I was like the only person using studio lights on location because that was sort of unfathomable.
Yeah, it was a difficult thing. It used to be a difficult thing.
Like, I mean, and then, when the B1s first came out and like, they're like, wait, there's a battery attached
Yeah.
to this. And there's like no cables at all. Like you don't have to run cabling from one thing to the next or whatever. Like that changed considerably.
Yeah.
And even back then, even that sort of predated the idea of like having a remote that you could adjust the power on your camera. So like maybe I'm still in the appreciation of just being able to be like, click, click, click. We got it.
Yeah.
Like that light's a little brighter now.
No, I mean, all of these things, what we talked about earlier, the reliability factor
Yeah.
is the ultimate thing.
Right.
Reliability,
Yeah.
design, usability, all that kind of stuff. So it's a small gripe, but
Yeah.
it is a gripe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I would love to have that, have the functionality of being able to know my exact light ratios. Cause once you start using a couple different lights on a couple different channels, it's pretty easy to just kind of like be pressing buttons and being like, I don't really remember what's changing what. So.
I can't tell you how many times I've been like, Mike, Anthony, what's the power on that light over there?
Yeah, exactly.
Like call it out on set.
Yeah.
On the camera side, what do you shoot with?
So I'm currently I'm still on the DSLR world.
Okay.
I haven't moved to the mirrorless, but I shoot with the Canon 5D Mark IV for the most part.
Old trusty.
Yeah. I mean, it's been reliable. I've shot Canon my entire career. I used to be the biggest Canon fanboy when, we were still young enough to like think gear was
Important.
super, super important. But I'm trying to move to Fuji with their GFX systems. So
Yeah. We were talking about that. The GFX 100S is a great system.
yeah, I haven't touched one yet. I have 2 different pre-orders out. I'm trying, they're impossible to find. They just were released. And they're so hard to find, and I'm like calling shops all the time.
Yeah.
But it's weird to like move to a new system after you've built your entire career on Canon.
For sure. I genuinely do feel like, though, I've talked about this actually in other videos, that Fuji is probably the only company that's making cameras that are actually like kind of exciting. Like they're fun for me to use.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the latest Canon, not to say that they're not incredible cameras. Canon makes great cameras. Sony makes great, so does Nikon, everything. But when I get a hold of a Fuji, from the X-T4s to I use the GFX 50R, the rangefinder one, to the GFX 100S, every one of them had these distinct characteristics that kind of made shooting fun again.
Yeah. Well, I've always loved medium format. Like I used to shoot a lot of stuff on phase systems and would rent phase systems for shoots and stuff like that. And I've always loved the look of medium format. It has like a special quality to it. It just functions a little differently. And for a long time, it was like you had to choose between like phase, which, before that it was like Mamiya or Hasselblad. And those were like your medium format systems. And, their digital medium format systems were tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. I mean, you could easily spend 50 grand, 60 grand on it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it got to a point where I was like, I probably will never be able to afford a $60,000 phase system. And it sort of like moved on from the medium format world. And then when Fuji started coming out with medium format cameras that were like not only way more affordable, but like pretty great feature sets too. I mean, like not as clunky and slow as the traditional medium format was. I've wanted to shoot medium format again, and I'm like finally making the push of like, I'm a studio photographer.
Yeah.
Medium format's perfect for me.
That would be a perfect, the GFX 100S. I took the Hasselblad and Phase 1. I think I got the HD 100 or something like that on loan. And I took this thing out, and not to say that this isn't an incredible camera system for what it does.
Yeah.
But I remember taking it out and being like, what the hell is this? Like slow to focus. I was trying to shoot a landscape with it. And I'm like, I think I got to put a tripod. Like this thing has to always be on a tripod. It's heavy. It's it made me feel like I was shooting slide film. I was like, I might as well just like not try to shoot anything that's moving at all.
Well, and I would always describe medium format to people as like, it's the hero camera. Like if I was shooting a campaign and they needed like a 2-page spread in a magazine or something like that, I'd want to shoot that on a medium format every single time. But then if there's 6 other photos in that campaign, like I'll just shoot that with Canon. That are just like little bylines and different things like that. But it's like when you need the like hero shot, like nothing can beat the resolution, nothing can beat those, but they're slow to focus.
But that's what it was meant for. It was meant for the studio shot. Everything's still, you know, you come out and you take this one image type thing. Then you get to the GFX systems, which Fuji has taken medium format and essentially blended it with the technology of mirrorless.
Yeah.
And the GFX 100S was, it's not going to be like Sony focus systems. Like those Sony focuses are kind of ridiculous. Yeah. But it's pretty freaking close. Like it's for a medium format. If you've ever used a Hasselblad or anything, you're like, dude, this is good for a DSLR. This is on par with standard mirrorless. Right. And if you compare it to medium format, this didn't even exist. Like this is just
Hasselblad in phase 1 up until recently was one focus point.
Yeah.
You got a focus point, and that's what you had.
Yeah.
And then, you know, now cameras have hundreds of them, thousands of them in some cases.
So. Yeah. So that, along with I kind of love the feel and the character of the cameras, the built-in films. Yeah. Like, they're truly like a joy to use.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited. Find me one. I'm ready.
We'll have to give Victor a shout out and see if he can't get you on some sort of a list for that.
I've been trying to cut people in lists for weeks now. Just like, come on, I'll give you a shout out. Let me skip the line. So
the one thing though that I think if I ever moved away from Canon we just barely upgraded to R5s. Mm-hmm. So the one thing I know I would miss on that side is Canon lenses.
Yeah. Well, and I don't plan on getting rid of my Canon system. Yeah. You know, because I have like 6 or 7 L series lenses, and frankly, like almost everything I shoot in my portfolio is on the 100 macro. And the rest, lens. And the rest of my lenses just kind of like sit in a bag in my closet. But I don't really intend on like selling off all of that quite yet. And I don't know why. Like I don't know if it's like nostalgic, if I plan on maybe coming back to Canon at some point. Or what, but I'm just like, I'm going to hold on to the lenses, and I'm told that I think you can mount them to the Fuji system with like an adapter. Oh, you probably can. So
have you seen some of the new RF lenses? Have you played with them
They're
yet?
incredible. Yeah. I shot with the 85s, both the one and then the soft focus one. Yeah. That has the like weird focusing technology in it. They're amazing. Yeah. Like, and I've shot with the R5 and love the R5. It's just one of those, like, now that, you know, my next camera is definitely going to be mirrorless. Eventually I'd have to convert my EF lenses to RF lenses, or I can just go in another direction entirely. So,
yeah, I've kind of been playing with the idea of just getting what I really want to do is just get either a GFX 50 or 100 and just slap a 35 millimeter on it and make it my kind of an enjoyment camera.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with my if I ever can get my GFX 100S, like I'm only buying one lens with it. Yeah. Eventually down the line, I'll probably buy more. But like I said, with my Canon system, my 100 macro is pretty much permanently mounted to my camera already. Yeah. So I've lost the allure of having a bag full of lenses.
There is no allure in that.
Yeah. there is when you first start.
Yeah, when you first start. Yeah. And then your back breaks and you're like, no.
Yeah. Like, this is a pain.
But the Canon has designed my favorite lens of all time. It's the 28-70 f2. Okay. And that I'd never seen anything like it.
Really? Like it's. See, I'm a prime guy, but
this will give you. This is what blew me away about it was it looks like a prime in terms of like you look at the aesthetic at f2 through the whole range. It looks like you're shooting on a 35 at 1.4. Right. And yet you get the zoom and quick focus speed of like a 2470, and I've never seen anything like it.
I mean, spec wise, like anything zoom f2 is unbelievable.
So. But it's $3,000 and I think it weighs like 5 pounds.
Yeah, it's the downsides.
It's heavy. Yeah, it's a monster. Well, dude, I have appreciated this conversation that we've had.
Yeah, me too, man. Thank you for having me out here. It's nice to. We've been talking about me stopping by your studio for years at this point, so I'm glad it finally happened.
It's been a long time, and so for our listeners, those that are listening or watching, where's the best place that they can kind of follow up on everything that you're doing?
I mean, the site that's curated the most and updated the most is my Instagram, which is ZSuttonPhoto. And then, zsuttonphoto.com. I'm zsuttonphoto on pretty much all the social media. So
awesome, dude. And are you going to be offering workshops, education, like that kind of stuff for
I'm hoping to.
photographers?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I want to do. The timeline on those kind of things is always up in the air. So
the tough part is that you're so successful at shooting, you might as well keep shooting, but then at the same time,
well, thank you.
You have so much to offer for people.
Yeah. Every time. Well, it's like what we talked about earlier, like the planning of a workshop is such a nightmare.
Huge.
It's so much work, and like promoting it and selling the seats, and especially, you do stuff with sponsors, so they have goals that they want to meet, and just kind of like trying to organize all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I usually go into a workshop very like cynical, but then like after the workshop, I have just like such a sense of like reward.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, that was really great. Like I feel like it really clicked with them. I feel like I really helped people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would like to teach a few more workshops at this year, but it's going to be see where we're at.
Do you have any online education right now available?
Yeah, I mean, I'm writing articles, in the free time that I have. So yeah, I just posted something on f-stoppers. I write fairly regularly for the lens rentals blog.
Okay.
But that's pretty technical stuff. I'm trying to blend it more into the kind of like practical work of how to do different things, but I try to like teach and like educate as much as I can. So
yeah, rad, dude. Well, I hope that at some point you create at least if you selling workshop seats is pretty difficult and keeping up with it, but I feel like the world deserves a Zach Sutton tutorial, like an actual full premium kind of online tutorial.
All right, you're producing it.
So I hate producing.
Well,
we've already talked about this.
I know. Well, we'll find somebody here to produce it.
It would be awesome, though. It would be awesome. I feel like you have so much to teach. And,
well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's something that I would love to do, and it's something that, I've wanted to do for a long time. It's always been a timing game and kind of organizing it. So,
well, cool, brother. Appreciate you being on here.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate having it.
Yeah.
Being here, and it's always great to see you, man.
All right, man. We'll chat soon.
All right, take care.